Pain is not just a sensation. It is a ghost that has haunted the human body since the first nerve fired in the first brain. 7,000 years ago, your ancestors already had a theory about it, and the theory had teeth. They believed pain was an intrusion, a demon that had burrowed into the skull and needed a door to escape. So they built one, a sharpened flint, a scraping stone, hands steadied by another member of the tribe. The tool was pressed against living bone and rotated with deliberate, agonizing pressure. Slowly, the skull wore away. A disc of bone lifted free, and beneath it, the dura mater pulsed with the rhythm of a terrified heart. This was trepanation. It is humanity's oldest known surgical procedure. Archaeologists have found trepanned skulls on every inhabited continent, from Peru to France to North Africa. The practice emerged again and again across the Neolithic world, a universal human answer to an invisible torment. The real question is not whether they did it. The question is why so many of them survived it. Bone regrowth around the edges of these ancient holes proves that many patients lived for years afterward. At a site in northern Spain, researchers recently found cranial surgery performed on a person suffering from a bone infection behind the ear. The infection cleared. The patient lived. This was not a killing ritual. This was medicine, aimed at migraines, seizures, and the crushing pressure of head injuries. The flint was not a weapon. It was a key, cut into bone, to let the suffering escape. But releasing a demon from the skull was the gentlest entry on a much darker list. When the pain moved from the head to the stomach, when starvation hollowed out a group until their own dead became the only food left, the ancient response to suffering turned into something far more horrifying. 40,500 years ago, in what is now Belgium, a group of Neanderthals entered the Goyet cave and did something that forces you to reconsider the limits of human suffering. Archaeologists recovered the bones of 4 adults and a child. They were scattered among butchered reindeer and horses, mixed into the debris of a meal. The cut marks on the human bones matched the cut marks on the animal bones exactly. Same angle, same depth, same purpose. Flesh had been stripped from limbs. Marrow had been drained from bone. The tongue was removed and the skull was opened at the base to reach the brain. These Neanderthals had been eaten. The anthropologist Hélène Rougier led the team that published this finding in 2016, and her analysis left no ambiguity. The bodies were processed with the same technical efficiency applied to any prey animal. There was no ritual at Goyet, no spiritual framework to soften it, just hunger. The cave is not an isolated horror. At Moula-Guercy in France, researchers found 6 individuals systematically butchered. At El Sidrón in Spain, 12 show the identical marks. Cannibalism was not an aberration in the Neanderthal world. It was a recurring strategy, one deployed only when every other option had run out. And here is where the story turns, because starvation cannibalism was only half the record. The anthropologists Erich Trinkhaus and Thomas Berger published a landmark study in 1995 that quantified just how violent Neanderthal life truly was. Between 79 and 94% of all known Neanderthal skeletons show evidence of at least one traumatic injury. These were not scratches, crushed eye sockets, fractured skulls, shattered thigh bones, ribs that healed at crooked angles. The injury pattern matches modern rodeo riders. The cost of hunting at close range, driving a wooden spear into a massive animal fighting for its life. A Neanderthal with a broken leg could not hunt. One with a crushed eye socket could not see a predator approaching, and yet the bones say they survived anyway. That means something else was happening, something more powerful than starvation. Compassion. In 1957, in the Shanidar cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraq, researchers unearthed a skeleton that would rewrite what we thought Neanderthals were capable of. The man, known as Shanidar One, lived roughly 45,000 years ago, and his body was a catalog of catastrophe. A crushing blow to his face had destroyed his left eye socket, leaving him blind on that side. His right arm had withered away below the elbow, amputated or paralyzed by nerve damage. His right leg had healed crooked, forcing a severe limp. He was profoundly deaf in one ear, with advanced joint disease throughout his body. By any cold calculation, Shanidar One was a drain on his group. He could not hunt, he could not defend himself. He could not keep pace when the group moved camp. The logical outcome was abandonment, left on a rock while the others walked on to survive. That is not what happened. The bone around his ruined eye socket had fully remodeled. The stump of his arm had healed clean, without infection. The fracture in his leg was old and fully calcified. This man survived his injuries for at least 10 years, and perhaps as long as 15. Every single day of that decade, someone brought him food, someone helped him walk, someone stood watch while he slept, keeping the cave lions and wolves away from a man who could not run and could not fight. The group did not leave him behind. The anthropologist Penny Spikins at the University of York built her career studying what she calls Neanderthal healthcare. Her analysis of more than 30 individuals with healed injuries reached a conclusion that rewrites the story of our genus. Care was not an occasional kindness among Neanderthals. It was a systematic and essential survival strategy. They lived in tight groups of perhaps 10 to 20 people, and losing even one member was a catastrophic blow to the group's ability to hunt and defend itself. So they carried the injured. They fed them. They protected them for as long as it took. This raises an uncomfortable question. If a group could care for a shattered body with that kind of devotion, what else did they understand about healing? The answer was not written on a bone. It was trapped in something far more intimate, hardened onto a tooth that had not been brushed in 40,000 years. In 2012, a team led by Karen Hardy at the University of Barcelona analyzed the dental plaque of a Neanderthal skeleton from the El Sidrón cave in Spain. This individual had been suffering terribly. His teeth showed a massive chronic abscess, the kind of pain that makes sleep and eating impossible. His gut had been ravaged by parasites, causing constant dehydrating diarrhea. Then the chemical analysis turned up something that should not have been there: traces of poplar bark. Poplar bark contains salicylic acid, the exact compound in modern aspirin. It is bitter, it carries no nutrition, and there is only one reason to chew it: to dull pain. The plaque held something even stranger: traces of the mold Penicillium, the same mold that would give the world its first true antibiotic. Modern science would not make that discovery until Alexander Fleming in 1928. 40,000 years earlier, a dying Neanderthal was already using it. The mold would have fought the infection in his jaw. The bark would have dulled the pain. He was self-medicating with a prehistoric pharmacy. Neither substance is food, which means this was knowledge, not instinct. Knowledge almost certainly passed down through generations who had learned which plants and molds fought which kind of suffering. The drive to heal was not unique to Neanderthals, and it did not disappear with them. 5,300 years ago, high in the Alps on the border of modern Italy and Austria, a man climbed to an elevation of 3,200 meters with an arrow lodged in his back and a severed artery. He collapsed face down in the ice. The glacier entombed him until German hikers found him in 1991. His name is Ötzi, the Tyrolean Iceman. The most astonishing thing about him is not his copper axe or his cloak of woven grass. It is his skin. He carried 61 tattoos, simple marks, short lines, and small crosses, clustered on his lower back, his right knee, his left wrist, his ankle, and his spine. Researchers first dismissed them as decoration. Then they scanned his skeleton. Ötzi suffered from advanced arthritis in his lower spine. Cartilage had worn completely away, bone grinding against bone with every step. The tattoos on his back sat directly over the damaged joints. The marks on his knee lined up with arthritic joint space. The lines on his ankle matched a site of chronic tendon damage. These were not tattoos. They were a map of his pain. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2015 confirmed that the placement of Ötzi's tattoos aligns with classical acupuncture meridians. They sit on the same points a modern acupuncturist would target for spinal arthritis, knee pain, and tendon inflammation. These are the oldest therapeutic tattoos ever found, made 5,300 years before acupuncture was formally documented in China. Someone, a healer whose name is lost, understood the link between specific points on the skin and pain deep inside the bone. That knowledge was preserved the only way it could be: in charcoal, rubbed into open cuts on human skin. But the drive to heal did not always lead somewhere good. Sometimes it produced horrors worse than the disease itself. The Ebers Papyrus, written in Egypt around 1,500 years before the birth of Christ, is one of the oldest medical texts in the world. It is a collection of nearly 900 remedies for headaches, toothaches, wounds, and burns. It is also a catalog of catastrophic errors. One prescription instructs the physician to pack an open wound with a mixture of donkey dung, dog dung, gazelle dung, and fly dung. The Egyptians had noticed that dung generates heat as it decomposes. They believed that heat and the foulness of it could drive out evil spirits. The result was not healing. Dung is a concentrated reservoir of bacteria, and packing it into an open wound guaranteed a massive infection, fever, then pus, then blackened rotting tissue, then death from sepsis within days. The Egyptians were not alone in getting it catastrophically wrong. For centuries, from the medieval period through the Renaissance, European physicians prescribed something even more macabre. It is known today as corpse medicine, the practice of consuming human remains as a cure for pain and disease. The theory held that a life force lingered in the body after death, and that eating human flesh, blood, or bone let a patient absorb it. Egyptian mummies were ground into powder and sold for headaches. Human skull was scraped into drinks for epilepsy. Blood collected from executions was drunk by the cup, and human fat was rendered into ointment for aching joints. The historian Richard Sugg documented all of this in his book Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires. He found that corpse medicine was never a fringe practice. It was mainstream, prescribed by respected physicians, endorsed by the church, consumed by kings and queens. A black market grew around it. Executioners sold blood and fat, and grave robbers sold fresh corpses to apothecaries. None of it worked. None of it could have worked, and still it persisted for centuries, because the drive to do something, anything, in the face of unbearable suffering is older and stronger than good evidence. This ancient struggle is not sealed in a cave in Belgium or frozen in a glacier in the Alps. It is inside you right now, written into your nerves. In 2020, a team led by Hugo Zeeberg and Svante Pabo at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology analyzed the DNA of 3 Neanderthal skeletons. They found a mutation in a gene called SCN9A. This gene builds a channel in your nerve cells, the molecular gate that opens when tissue is damaged and lets sodium flood in. That flood sends a signal racing up your spine to your brain. That signal is pain. The Neanderthal version of this gene makes the gate open more easily. A smaller injury triggers a larger signal. Neanderthals were wired to feel pain more intensely than you do, by default. The researchers then checked the genomes of more than 362,000 living people in the United Kingdom. A significant share of modern humans still carry the Neanderthal version of that gene. Those people report more pain in daily life than those without it, an effect equivalent to aging 8 extra years. This gene is not spread evenly across the world. It shows up in roughly 40% of some populations of Central and South American descent, in about 10% of East Asians, and in a smaller share of Europeans. If you carry it, and there is a real chance that you do, then every headache, every stubbed toe, every aching joint you have ever felt has been amplified by code first shaped inside a Neanderthal who died 40,000 years ago. That gene did not survive by accident. Pain is a warning system, and a body that feels it more sharply is a body more motivated to protect a wound and seek help. That hypervigilant signal may be the very reason Shanidar One survived his crushed eye socket for a decade. It may be the reason the man at El Sidrón reached for bitter bark before an infection in his jaw could reach his brain. The Neanderthals themselves are gone. The last of them died in a cave in Gibraltar roughly 40,000 years ago, the final members of a species that had endured for more than 350,000 years. But a piece of them did not go extinct. It is sitting in your DNA right now, still firing, still amplifying every ache you feel. The darkest thing ancient humans did about pain was never one single act. It was the full range of what they were capable of. They cut holes in each other's skulls to release demons. They ate their own dead when starvation left no other choice. They carried a crippled man for a decade, feeding him by hand. They discovered aspirin and a natural antibiotic 40,000 years before modern medicine caught up. They mapped the body's pain pathways in charcoal on human skin. They packed open wounds with dung and watched patients die of sepsis. They ground up mummies and drank human blood, chasing a cure that never existed. And then, without meaning to, they left a piece of themselves behind in you. A single gene, a slightly lower threshold for pain, quietly inherited, still working, 40,000 years later, in the body reading these words right now.